I'm Megan, 32 years old, and for my entire life, I've been the responsible one, the architect daughter who paid her own way and always showed up. Last Christmas was supposed to be the year things finally changed. After landing a huge promotion, I drove home thinking my family would finally see my success. But instead, I watched my younger sister unwrap the keys to a brand new $35,000 Audi. Then my mom handed me a small box and said, "This is for your future home, sweetie." Inside was a pink piggy bank and a single dollar bill, $1. The humiliation was absolute. That night, I packed my bag and left without a word. If you've ever felt completely invisible to the people who are supposed to see you most, let me know where you're watching from. And you'll want to subscribe, because what they did after I disappeared was even worse. You see, while my family saw me as the dependable daughter stuck in a boring job, something else was happening in the background. Something they knew nothing about. For 5 years, my life had been a repeating cycle of pre-dawn alarms and late-night takeout eaten over blueprints. My apartment was less of a home and more of a charging station for the next workday. I was the first person in the office every morning and the last one to leave. My colleagues would joke about me having a bed hidden under my desk. And honestly, some nights, it felt like I did. I poured everything I had into my work at the architecture firm. Every ounce of frustration from my family life, every ignored achievement, every bit of loneliness. I channeled it all into steel, glass, and sustainable design. It was the one place where effort directly translated to results. The one place where my contributions weren't just seen, they were celebrated. I climbed the ladder, not quickly, but steadily. From junior designer to project manager, I took on the assignments no one else wanted. The difficult clients, the impossible deadlines, the projects with budgets so tight they squeaked. And I delivered, every single time. My social life was practically non-existent. While my sister Lily was gallery hopping in Europe on my parents' dime, I was spending my weekends mastering new rendering software. While her friends were posting pictures from brunch, my camera roll was filled with photos of construction sites and zoning permits. I didn't mind. Or rather, I told myself I didn't mind. Each successful project felt like a small victory against the invisibility I felt at home. Each word of praise from my director, Mr. Davidson, felt more real than any hollow compliment my parents ever gave me. Then, last October, it all paid off. Mr. Davidson called me into his office. I remember the weight of the silence as he closed the door. I thought I was in trouble. Instead, he pushed a folder across his desk. "Megan," he said, "we're promoting you to senior designer." It wasn't just a title change. It was a serious salary bump, leadership over my own projects, and a level of respect I had spent my entire career fighting for. I called my parents that night, buzzing with a rare sense of pride. I finally had something tangible, something undeniable to share. My mother's reaction? "Oh, that's nice, honey. Did I tell you Lily is dating a doctor now?" The words deflated me instantly. But that wasn't the most important part of the conversation with my boss. There was something else he offered that day. A secret. A weapon I didn't even know I was forging. He said, "Your work on the Portland Eco Office project has been getting attention. A lot of attention. The Seattle office has been asking for someone with your specific skill set. If you're ever interested, the opportunity to transfer is on the table. It would be a significant step up, Seattle." The thought was both terrifying and electrifying. But I turned it down. I said I needed to stay close to family. What a joke. The truth is, I was still clinging to that sliver of hope that they would finally see me, that my promotion would be enough. So I kept his offer to myself. It became my secret escape plan, my ace in the hole. My family had no idea. To them, I was just Megan, the predictable daughter in her tiny Portland apartment, dutifully paying off her student loans. They heard promotion and thought it meant an extra $50 a week. They had no concept of the professional world I inhabited, no idea of the reputation I was building, and absolutely no clue that I held a golden ticket to a new life 3 hours up the I-5. They continued to treat me like I was stuck, like my world was as small as they perceived it to be. And that ignorance, that was their biggest mistake. Because while they were busy celebrating Lily, I was quietly building my own kingdom. And I had the key to a whole new castle they never even knew existed. The drive home for Christmas felt different this year. I had my secret, my promotion, tucked away like a winning lottery ticket. I allowed myself a dangerous luxury, hope. Maybe this time, they'd finally get it. I'd spent more than I should have on their gifts. A designer wallet for Dad, a cashmere scarf for Mom, tangible proof of my success. I pulled into the driveway on Christmas Eve, right behind my father's SUV. The house was lit up exactly as it always was, a perfect picture postcard of holiday cheer. But as soon as I walked through the door, a knot formed in my stomach. The air was thick with an energy that felt off. My mother's hug was quicker than usual. My father seemed distracted, constantly checking his watch. They were buzzing with a secret excitement, but it wasn't for me. I could feel it. They kept exchanging these little glances, these tiny, knowing smiles. It was like being on the outside of an inside joke that everyone else was in on. Downstairs in the kitchen, I fell into my usual role, peeling potatoes while my mom directed traffic. Lily arrived with her new boyfriend, Ben, and the whole house lit up. My father, who had barely acknowledged my promotion, was suddenly booming with joy, calling Ben son. I spent the rest of the evening feeling like a ghost, floating on the edges of my own family gathering, refilling drinks and clearing plates while everyone else laughed. I should have known then. The warning signs were all there, blinking like the cheap Christmas lights on the roof. Christmas morning started with me, as always, making breakfast for everyone. Pancakes, bacon, the whole spread. They trickled downstairs, Lily last, of course, looking effortlessly perfect. After breakfast, we gathered around the tree. The gift exchange was a familiar ritual. Lily went first, tearing through presents with childlike glee. She opened my gift to her, concert tickets I'd spent a fortune on, with a quick thanks, before moving on to the next shiny thing. When my turn came, I received the usual generic gifts: a scarf from my aunt, bath products from a cousin. Then came my parents' gift, a department store gift card. Impersonal, standard. It could have been for anyone. As the last of the regular gifts were opened, my father stood up, clearing his throat. The performance was about to begin. "We have one special surprise this year," he announced, his face beaming. "Lily, your mother and I are so proud of you. We wanted to do something special to show our support." He handed her a small gold-wrapped box. Inside was a car key. An Audi key. Lily screamed. A genuine, ear-splitting shriek of pure joy. We all filed outside into the cold, and there it was. A brand new white Audi A4, sitting in the driveway with a ridiculously large red bow on top. A $35,000 car. More than I made in an entire year before my promotion. "You deserve this, sweetheart," my mother said, hugging Lily. "You need reliable transportation for your new gallery internship." The unpaid internship. The one my parents had pulled strings to get for her. The one she'd been complaining about. I just stood on the porch, wrapping my arms around myself, feeling the chill seep into my bones. When we got back inside, my mother suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, we almost forgot! Megan, we have something special for you, too." For a single stupid moment, that hope flickered back to life. Maybe they'd saved mine for last. Maybe they'd finally seen me. She handed me a small, lightweight box wrapped in leftover birthday paper. I opened it carefully. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a small, pink ceramic piggy bank. Beside it lay a single, crisp $1 bill. I stared at it, waiting for the punchline. Anything to make it make sense. "That's our contribution to your future home," my mother said, smiling warmly, as if she had just handed me the world. You were just saying you wanted to buy a house someday. Well, every journey begins with a single step. The room fell silent. Even my aunt, who could talk the chrome off a bumper, was speechless. Heather examined her manicure and offered her own piece of wisdom. You really should move out of that tiny apartment, Megan. It's kind of sad for someone your age. My apartment, the one I paid for all on my own. I stood up abruptly. I need some fresh air, I mumbled, and walked out the back door. No one tried to stop me. I sat on my old childhood swing set, the cold chains biting through my jeans, and finally let the tears fall. 32 years. It wasn't just a gift, it was a message, loud and clear. You are on your own. You always have been. After sitting in the cold until I couldn't feel my fingers, I walked back inside, packed my bags, wrote a short note, and left. Snow had begun to fall as I backed out of the driveway, the house glowing behind me, filled with people who hadn't even noticed I was gone. 2 hours into my drive north, my phone, which had been silent, buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Don't forget to pay the utility bills due on the 28th. Not, where are you? Not, are you safe? A reminder about bills. Then came my father. Internet payment processes tomorrow. Make sure there's enough in your account. The calls started after that. I let them go to voicemail. Your note is very dramatic, my mother's voice dripped with annoyance. I don't understand why you would leave on Christmas Day over a simple gift. The piggy bank was cute. Then came Heather. Way to ruin Christmas, Megan. You're just jealous of my car. Each message was another twist of the knife. I pulled off the highway, my hands shaking too much to drive. I found a 24-hour diner, a little island of light in the swirling snow. I just needed a minute, a cup of coffee, a place to breathe. As I sat in the booth, my phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number, but it was from my office. My heart stopped. Why would my boss, Mrs. Davidson, be calling me on Christmas night? I answered, a cold dread washing over me. Megan, she said, her voice careful. I'm so sorry to bother you. Your mother called me a few minutes ago. My blood ran cold. My mother called you? Yes, she continued. She sounded very concerned. She said you were having an emotional crisis, and she was worried you might make some rash decisions. She just wanted to make sure the company was aware, so we could support you when you get back. Emotional crisis. Support. The corporate speak was a thin veil for what was really happening. My mother wasn't concerned. She was trying to destroy me. She was painting me as an unstable employee, a liability, in the one place where I had built my own worth. She was trying to box me in, to poison my professional life, my last refuge. This wasn't neglect anymore. This was a calculated attack. The anger that rose in me was different. It wasn't hot and messy. It was cold. It was sharp. My plan to transfer to Seattle was no longer a dream. It was now a necessity. It was survival. And that's when I realized, after all the years of trying to earn their love, I had to stop. At this point, I don't even know what word to use for what they did. If you're feeling as outraged as I am right now, help me out. Comment one word to describe this family's actions. Because instead of breaking me, that phone call forged something new inside of me. Something hard, something unbreakable. After I hung up with my boss, something inside me shifted. The hot, messy tears of grief and humiliation froze over. They were replaced by something else. A cold, hard clarity. I sat there in that diner booth, the untouched pie sweating under the fluorescent lights, and I saw my entire life laid out before me like a blueprint. 32 years of trying. 32 years of hoping that if I just worked a little harder, achieved a little more, gave a little more thoughtfully, I would finally earn the love that was given to my sister so freely. It was a rigged game, and I had been the only one playing by the rules. My mother's phone call to my boss wasn't an act of concern. It was an act of war. It was a calculated move to keep me in my place, to remind me that even my professional life, the one thing I had built for myself, was not beyond her reach. She was trying to burn down my only safe harbor. I finally understood. They would never change. The dynamic was too comfortable for them. I was the responsible one, the stable pillar that allowed everyone else to be blissfully irresponsible. My purpose in the family was to be the backdrop for my sister's spotlight. And the moment I threatened to walk off stage, they would do anything to drag me back. Anything. The realization didn't break me, it freed me. The pain was still there, a deep, aching void. But now it had a purpose. It became fuel. The endless loop of hope and disappointment was over. There would be no next time. This was it. Enough was enough. I paid for my coffee, left a tip big enough to make the kind waitress's eyes widen, and walked back out into the storm. The snow was coming down harder now, thick and heavy, muffling the world in a blanket of white. But for the first time, I didn't feel lost in it. I felt focused. I got back in my 7-year-old Honda, the car I'd bought myself, and instead of continuing to drive blindly, I pulled into the parking lot of the first decent-looking motel I saw. The room was generic, clean, and blessedly anonymous. It was a perfect blank slate. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I acted. I sat cross-legged on the bed, opened my laptop, and began to dismantle my old life and build a new one, brick by methodical brick. The first thing I did was draft an email to my boss, Mrs. Davidson. I kept it professional, concise. I formally requested the transfer to the Seattle office we had discussed during my promotion review, citing a sudden change in family circumstances that made a move necessary. I attached my updated portfolio and a summary of my recent project successes. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. One bridge burned, one new one under construction. Next, I called my best friend, Samantha. She picked up on the first ring. "Did you leave?" she asked, her voice quiet. "I left," I confirmed. "And I'm not going back. Can I take you up on that offer for your guest room, just for a little while?" "My guest room is your room," she said, with no hesitation. "For as long as you need it." That was it. No drama, just support. The kind of support I'd craved from my family my entire life. With a temporary safe house secured, I turned my attention to fortifications. I went through my phone and one by one blocked their numbers. My mother, my father, Lily, my aunt. All of them. The silence that followed was immediate and profound. It was like stepping out of a deafening factory and into a quiet field. Then, I logged into my email and created a new folder. I named it simply Family. I set up a filter to automatically route any emails from their addresses directly into that folder, unread. I would decide when, or if, I was emotionally ready to deal with their words. I was taking back control. As I worked, I found old journals I had packed from my childhood room. Flipping through them revealed a heartbreaking pattern. Entry after entry of a young girl trying to understand why she wasn't enough, promising to try harder, to be better, to earn the love her sister received just for existing. I closed the journal and put it away. I didn't need to read anymore. I had lived it. I stayed up until nearly 3 a.m., researching apartments in Seattle, creating spreadsheets of budgets, and mapping out neighborhoods. The practical tasks calmed the storm inside me. This wasn't an emotional escape anymore. This was a strategic relocation. Before I finally fell asleep, I took the pink piggy bank out of my coat pocket. It felt cheap and hollow in my hand, a symbol of their dismissal. I placed it on the nightstand, a stark reminder of why I was doing this. It wasn't an insult anymore. It was my declaration of independence. I made it to Seattle the next day, after my car decided to have a convenient and costly breakdown, forcing a 2-day layover in a small town called Maplewood. Another delay, another unexpected expense I had to cover on my own. It just reinforced my decision. The first few weeks at Samantha's place were a blur of decompression and paperwork. My transfer was approved faster than I could have hoped. The Seattle office was eager to have me. I started my new job, throwing myself into the work with a renewed sense of purpose. And then, just as I was starting to breathe again, my father launched his counterattack. It arrived in my inbox, a cold corporate email from my student loan provider. The subject line read, "Inquiry regarding co-signer release." My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it. My father, the man who had co-signed my $27,000 student loan years ago, was formally requesting to have his name removed. The email explained the bureaucratic process. I would have to reapply for the loan under my own name, submitting years of financial records to prove my stability. If I weren't approved, the full amount could become due immediately. It was a power play, pure and simple, a financial threat designed to destabilize me. A few minutes later, a call came through from an unknown number. I knew who it was. "I assume you got the email." My father's voice was devoid of warmth. "The loan company notified me of your address change. I think it's time for some accountability. If you're adult enough to move to another city without a word, then you're adult enough to handle your financial obligations on your own." The hypocrisy was staggering. "My financial obligations?" I shot back, my voice shaking with a cold rage. "I have paid every single bill on my own since the day I graduated. I took on this debt because you and Mom paid for every last cent of Lily's education. And now you're using it as a weapon?" "This isn't a punishment, Megan," he said, the lie hanging in the air between us. "It's a lesson in consequences. Perhaps if you learned to communicate with your family respectfully, we wouldn't be at this point." I hung up. The last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This was how they fought. Not with honest emotion, but with manipulation and control. My mother tried to sabotage my career. My father was trying to sabotage my finances. They were trying to prove that I couldn't make it without them. And they had just given me all the motivation I would ever need to prove them wrong. This wasn't just about leaving home anymore. This was about winning. My father's attack on my finances did the opposite of what he intended. It didn't make me feel weak or dependent. It sharpened my resolve into a razor's edge. I spent the next 2 months working with a relentless focus. I submitted every piece of paperwork the loan company demanded. I hired a financial advisor. I worked overtime on a major pitch for a new development, pouring every bit of my anger and determination into the project. And we won. We won big. The victory came with a significant bonus, a bonus my father knew nothing about. I refinanced my student loan entirely under my own name at a better interest rate. I was finally, completely, financially free of him. The chains he thought he held had turned to dust. I didn't tell him. I let him believe he still had that power over me. I was just waiting for the right moment. That moment came in April. I was walking back from lunch, enjoying a rare sunny day in Seattle, when I saw him. He was standing in the lobby of my office building, looking lost and out of place. He looked older, more haggard than I remembered, clutching a manila envelope like a lifeline. My first instinct was to turn around, to run and hide. The old Megan would have, but the old Megan was gone. I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked straight towards him. "Dad," I said. My voice was calm, even. He jumped, startled, then his face settled into a practiced mask of paternal concern. "Megan, your cousin works in HR. She told me where to find you." A privacy violation. I added it to the list. "Why are you here?" "We need to talk," he said, his voice taking on that familiar, authoritative tone. "This has gone on long enough. Your mother is beside herself with worry." I didn't react. I just nodded towards the coffee shop across the street. 20 minutes, I said. That's all the time I have before my next meeting." The look on his face was priceless. He wasn't in control here. I was. We sat at a small table in the corner, a steaming cup of tea between my hands, an untouched black coffee in front of him. He launched right into his prepared speech, the one he'd probably rehearsed the entire flight over. It was a masterclass in guilt-tripping and minimizing. "Your mother and I don't understand why you've done this," he began. "Running away over a Christmas gift seems extreme. Even for you. Even for you." The subtle dig, the lifelong implication that I was overly sensitive, that my feelings were an inconvenience. I let him talk. I let him spin his narrative about how worried they were, how my silent treatment was childish and cruel, how I was tearing the family apart. He painted a picture of two loving parents, bewildered by their ungrateful daughter's dramatic tantrum. He believed every word he was saying. He truly saw himself as the victim. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise of the cafe. "It was never about the gift, Dad." "Then what was it about?" he asked, genuinely confused, which was perhaps the most painful part of it all. "The gift," I said, leaning forward slightly, "was merely the final piece of evidence in a 32-year-long case I've been building in my head, a case for emotional neglect." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. "That's a terrible thing to say." "Is it?" I asked. "Let's review the evidence. You gave my sister, who has never held a steady job, a $35,000 car to support her unpaid internship. You gave me, a senior designer with 5 years of experience, a piggy bank and $1. Can you truly not see the disparity in that?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Lily needed a car. You have a car." "A car I bought myself," I said, my voice like ice. "Just like I paid for my own education while you funded hers. Just like I paid for my own apartment while you subsidized hers. You haven't just supported her, Dad. You have enabled her, and in doing so, you have erased me." "We never meant to erase you," he countered, falling back on the old excuse. "You were always so capable, so independent." And that's when I dropped the first bomb. I looked him straight in the eye. "Independence that is forced upon a child is not a gift, Dad. It is a form of abandonment." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. He had no response. The confident, in-control man who had walked into my lobby was gone. In his place was a man who looked small. For the first time, I think he was seeing the cracks in his own reality, but I wasn't finished. "And it didn't stop with abandonment," I continued, my voice steady. "When I finally chose to protect myself, when I finally walked away from a dynamic that was slowly killing my spirit, you didn't react with concern, you reacted with punishment." "Punishment? What are you talking about?" "Let's start with Mom," I said, ticking the points off on my fingers. "She called my boss on Christmas night. She told my superior that I was having an emotional crisis and was unstable. She tried to sabotage my career, the one thing I built entirely on my own, to scare me into coming back." His face went pale. He hadn't known that part. I could see the flicker of shock in his eyes. He opened his mouth to defend her, but I cut him off. "And then there's you," I said, my gaze unwavering. "You tried to use my student loan as a leash. You thought you could threaten my financial stability, the stability I worked myself to the bone to achieve, to force me back into line. You tried to weaponize the very debt that your favoritism created in the first place." I let that sink in. I watched as the narrative he had so carefully constructed, the one where he was the loving, wronged father, crumbled to dust around him. He just stared into his coffee cup, speechless. The silence stretched on, thick with everything that had been left unsaid for 3 decades. Finally, I checked my watch. "My 20 minutes are up," I said, standing. "I have to get back to work." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. For the first time, I saw fear in them, the fear of losing control. "Will you come home?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Your mother misses you." I almost laughed. It was so predictable. Even now, after everything, he was still trying to use her feelings as a tool to manipulate me. "This is my home now, Dad," I replied, my voice firm. "I'm building a life here. A good one where my worth isn't determined by how useful I am to someone else." "And we're not a part of it?" he asked, the hurt in his voice genuine now. This was real to him. The consequences were finally real. I paused at the door, turning back to him one last time. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "That depends on whether you and Mom can ever see the daughter you actually have, instead of the role you needed me to play." I walked out of the coffee shop and back into the sunlight, leaving him alone with the wreckage of his own making. My hands were shaking, but my conscience was clear. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my unedited truth, and it felt like breathing for the very first time. I didn't look back. I had a meeting to get to, a new building to design, a new life to live, and they weren't going to stop me. Not anymore. I walked away from that coffee shop feeling like I had shed a 32-year-old skin. The weight was gone. Back at the office, I was completely dialed in, focused on my work with an intensity that surprised even myself. It was as if severing that final toxic tie had unlocked a new level of creative energy. I didn't have to wait long. The fallout began less than an hour after I left my father sitting there. My phone, which had been blissfully silent for months, erupted. It was a full-scale digital assault. First came the texts from my father, starting with disbelief and quickly escalating to anger. "What was that, Megan? What kind of cruel performance was that?" Followed by, "You have no idea what you've done. You call your mother right now and apologize." I didn't respond. I just watched the messages pile up, each one more frantic than the last. Then, my mother joined the fray. Her messages were a masterclass in emotional manipulation. "Megan, your father just called me, sobbing. Is this what you wanted? To break your father's heart? After everything we've done for you?" The word sobbing was comical. I had never seen my father cry in my entire life, not even at his own mother's funeral. It was such a blatant, clumsy lie. It was almost insulting. When the text didn't work, the phone calls started. I had unblocked their numbers after the student loan incident, anticipating something like this. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to have a record of it. I let each call go to voicemail, listening to the messages later with a strange sense of detachment, like an anthropologist studying a newly discovered tribe. The first voicemail from my father was pure, sputtering rage. "I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but it's over," he boomed. "You have twisted our words, invented these fantasies of neglect. It's slanderous. You will call us back and retract every single lie you told me today. Do you understand me?" The next one, from my mother, was a pivot to performative victimhood. Her voice was thick with fake tears. I can't believe this is the daughter I raised," she whimpered. "So cold, so hateful. We gave you everything. We loved you. How can you be so cruel? My blood pressure is through the roof. The doctor said I need to avoid stress. Is that what you want? To make me sick?" It was their classic 1-2 punch. Father played the angry authority figure. Mother played the fragile martyr. They had been running this play my whole life, and for the first time I wasn't buying tickets to the show. Then, Lily entered the chaos. Her text was exactly what I expected. "WTF, Megan? Dad just called Mom and she's a complete mess. You really are that selfish. You couldn't just be happy for me for once in your life? You always have to make everything about you. Thanks for ruining everything." Again. Again. As if my very existence was a constant inconvenience to her happiness. There was no reflection, no curiosity about my side of the story. Just pure, unadulterated entitlement. The sheer volume of calls and texts was overwhelming. It was a digital siege. They were trying to break me down, to overwhelm my defenses with a relentless barrage of guilt, blame, and manufactured hysteria. They were so used to me being the calm center of their storm, the one who would absorb their chaos and smooth things over. They couldn't comprehend a reality where I refused to play that role. They didn't see me as a person with legitimate grievances. They saw me as a malfunctioning appliance that needed to be bullied back into working order. The panic in their messages was palpable. It wasn't just about their hurt feelings, it was about losing their asset. The reliable daughter, the built-in babysitter, the emergency contact, the emotional punching bag. I was walking away from a lifelong, unpaid job, and they were furious. The next stage of their campaign was to weaponize the extended family. My phone started buzzing with texts from aunts and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. The messages were all variations on the same theme, clearly fed to them by my mother. Megan, your poor mother is heartbroken. Whatever is going on, you need to fix it. Family is everything. My cousin Jessica, the one whose wedding I would later attend, sent a more neutral message. Hey, just heard things are intense. Hope you're okay. She was the only one who even considered my well-being. But the most predictable and most infuriating message came from my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister and chief enabler. Her text was a novel of self-righteous indignation. I am absolutely disgusted by your behavior, Megan. Your mother has been nothing but a saint to you girls, and this is how you repay her? By abandoning her? She was hospitalized this morning with chest pains. The doctors said it was stress. I hope you're proud of yourself. The chest pains. Of course. It was the nuclear option in my mother's playbook of manipulation. The old me would have collapsed in a pile of guilt. The old me would have been on the next flight home, ready to apologize for whatever crime I had been accused of. But the new me was a strategist. I calmly picked up my phone, looked up the number for the main hospital in my hometown, and called the information desk. I asked if a Diane Wilson had been admitted that day. The receptionist put me on hold for a moment. No, she said, her voice bored. No one by that name has been admitted or treated here today. I thanked her and hung up. The lie was so clean, so simple. And it confirmed everything. They would stop at nothing. There was no line they wouldn't cross, no lie they wouldn't tell, to get what they wanted. When the stress-induced chest pains gambit failed, when I didn't come running back full of tears and apologies, they moved on to a new strategy, something far more insidious. They decided to attack my support system. Samantha called me that night, and her voice was tight with an anger I'd never heard before. You are not going to believe this, she said, her words clipped. Your mother just sent me the most insane, novel-length message on Facebook. She read it to me. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. My mother wrote about her grave concern for my mental health. She said I hadn't been myself since moving to Seattle, that I was distant and cold. She hinted that I was under some kind of negative influence from new people in my life, a thinly veiled jab at Samantha herself. She was trying to paint me as fragile, unstable, a person making destructive life choices in a vulnerable state. And then came the hook. She begged Samantha, as my best friend, to please talk some sense into me, to help me see the error of my ways before it's too late. She was trying to turn my best friend into her spy, her agent. She was trying to plant a seed of doubt in the mind of the one person on this planet I trusted completely. Samantha, of course, didn't buy it for a second. She told me she sent back a blistering reply telling my mother that my mental health had never been better, and that maybe she should look at her own behavior. But the act itself, the sheer audacity of it was like they had tried to poison the last clean well in the desert. They weren't just trying to control me anymore. They were trying to isolate me, to cut me off from anyone who could validate my reality, anyone who could tell me I wasn't crazy. It was a classic abuser's tactic, and it was the final nail, the absolute, final nail, in the coffin of any doubt I had left, any lingering microscopic shred of hope for reconciliation. It was gone. It was incinerated in that moment. They had made it clear. They didn't want a relationship with me. They wanted a puppet, and they were willing to cut every last string I had to the outside world to get it. The final phase of the onslaught was bargaining, led, of course, by my father. After a full day of angry voicemails had failed, his tone shifted. The next message was almost conciliatory. "All right, Megan," he said, sounding exhausted. "Clearly, we've had a major miscommunication. Let's put a pin in this. I've calmed down. Your mother is resting. Why don't you fly home this weekend? We'll have a calm, rational discussion. Just the four of us. We can talk through whatever this is and figure out a way to move forward. We can fix this." Fix this. The words echoed in my head. He didn't want to understand. He didn't want to apologize. He wanted to fix me. He wanted to negotiate the terms of my surrender. He thought he could sit me down at the kitchen table and lecture me back into submission, back into my designated role. He still didn't get it. He still thought he held all the cards. But as I sat in my quiet Seattle apartment, looking out at the city lights twinkling against the dark water, I knew something he didn't. I wasn't just holding a better hand. I was playing an entirely different game, and I was about to make my winning move. The chaos wasn't getting to me. It was fueling me. Every lie, every accusation, every manipulative plea just hardened my resolve. They were showing me exactly who they were, and I believed them. After my father's final, desperate voicemail offering to fix things, I knew the chaotic, reactionary phase was over. Now, it was time to build my fortress. The first step was simple, but powerful. I went back into my phone's settings and, with a final satisfying tap, I reblocked all their numbers. The digital siege was officially over. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was peaceful. It was the sound of my own sovereignty. But I knew blocking them wasn't enough. They were resourceful. I needed a more permanent solution. That evening, sitting on the couch in my new Capitol Hill apartment, a place that was mine and mine alone, I drafted an email. It was addressed to my parents, Lily, and my Aunt Linda. It was the calmest, coldest thing I have ever written. I wrote that their attempts to manipulate me through my career, my finances, and fake medical emergencies were unacceptable. I stated that their behavior had caused irreparable damage to our relationship. Therefore, I was instituting a period of no contact, indefinitely. I wrote that any future attempts to contact me, my friends, or my workplace would be documented. I ended it with a single clear sentence. I am no longer responsible for your problems, your finances, or your feelings. You are on your own. I read it over once, attached the screenshot of the hospital's confirmation that my mother had never been a patient, and hit send. Then, I set up a final, powerful email filter. Any future emails from them would be automatically and permanently deleted. Not archived, deleted. I would never even see them. It was a digital amputation. It was the only way to stop the spread of the poison. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting to their chaos, I was ending it. I had chosen myself over their desperate need for control. It was a monumental moment. If you support this powerful decision, drop an emoji in the comments to send her some strength for the journey ahead. Because that support, even unspoken, was exactly what she needed to start rebuilding her world. And rebuild, I did. Once the noise of my biological family was silenced, I was able to finally hear the other voices that had been trying to support me all along. The first and most important was Samantha. She had been my rock since the moment I called her from that motel room. When I finally moved into my own apartment, she was there with a pizza, a six-pack of beer, and an Allen wrench, ready to help me build my cheap IKEA furniture. We sat on the floor of my empty living room that night, and I told her everything, every last humiliating detail. She didn't offer advice or try to soften the blow. She just listened. And when I was done, she looked at me and said, "They didn't deserve you, Megan. They never did." Those simple words validated a lifetime of suppressed feelings. She was the sister I had always needed. Then there was my professional family. My boss, Mrs. Davidson, called me into her office a week after my official transfer. I was nervous, expecting some fallout from my mother's insane phone call. Instead, she slid a project file across the table. "Welcome to Seattle, Megan," she said with a warm smile. "We're putting you on point for the West Side development pitch. I know you can handle it." There was no mention of my emotional crisis, just trust, respect, an opportunity to prove myself based on my merits, not my family drama. My new colleagues were the same. They were brilliant, driven, and collaborative. They saw me as a peer, an asset. They didn't know or care about my family history. They just knew I was good at my job. For the first time, I was just Megan, the architect. Not Megan, the responsible older sister. The freedom was intoxicating. And then there were the unexpected connections, the quiet kindnesses that started to fill in the cracks of my broken foundation. I started taking a pottery class on Sundays, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. The instructor, a gentle older woman named Sarah, didn't just teach me how to center clay. She taught me how to be present, how to find beauty in imperfection. My next-door neighbor, an old man who spent his days tending to his immaculate rose garden, would leave a single, perfect rose on my doorstep every Monday morning. We barely spoke, but it was a silent, consistent gesture of welcome. And I never forgot Gloria, the waitress from that roadside diner on Christmas night. I had found the diner on Google Maps and sent her a thank you card with a generous gift certificate inside. A week later, I received a letter back from her, written on a piece of diner stationery. She told me she was proud of me. She told me that blood makes you related, but loyalty and love make you family. We became unlikely pen pals. Her simple, wise letters, filled with stories from her own difficult life, became a source of incredible strength. Samantha, Mrs. Davidson, Sarah, my neighbor, and Gloria, they became my new constellation, my chosen family. They weren't bound to me by blood or obligation. They were connected to me through mutual respect, shared interests, and simple human kindness. They were building me back up, piece by piece, not into the person my family wanted me to be, but into the person I was always meant to become. The silence from Portland was absolute. And in that silence, I finally began to build a life that was truly, completely, and unapologetically my own. A year can change everything. Fast forward 12 months, and the life I'm living now is one the old me wouldn't even recognize. My Seattle apartment is no longer just a place to sleep. It's a home. It's filled with art from local markets, shelves overflowing with books, and furniture that I chose, piece by piece. My career has taken off in ways I never imagined. After the success of the West Side Development Project, I was promoted to Design Team Lead. The Emerson Green Design Award, something I used to dream about, now sits on my desk. And I'm in a relationship, a healthy one. His name is Marcus, an environmental engineer I met through work. He's kind, he's brilliant, and he celebrates my successes as if they were his own. This Christmas, there was no tense drive home. Instead, I hosted. My chosen family gathered in my apartment: Samantha, Gloria from the diner, a few colleagues, and my neighbor with the roses. The air was filled with laughter and the smell of good food, not suffocating obligation. I did hear about what happened back in Portland through my cousin Jessica. The perfect facade of the Wilson family had crumbled. Without me there to absorb the chaos and quietly fix things, the cracks started to show. My father lost his job in a corporate downsizing about 6 months after our confrontation. The financial strain was immediate. The shiny new Audi? It was repossessed. Lily, stripped of her safety net, was forced to get a real job. She's a receptionist at a dental office now. Jessica said it was a brutal reality check for her. My mother had to take a part-time job at a department store. The life of leisure she had so carefully constructed was over. I didn't feel joy at their misfortune, but I didn't feel guilt either. I just felt clarity. Their perfect world had been a house of cards, and I had simply been the one card they pulled out that made it all fall. The real surprise came at Jessica's wedding in June. I went, but on my own terms, staying in a hotel with Samantha as my buffer. After the ceremony, Lily approached me. She looked different, thinner, less confident. "I never understood why you left," she said, her voice quiet. "I thought you were just jealous of the car." "It was never about the car, Lily," I told her. She nodded, looking down at her practical, non-designer shoes. "I know that now," she admitted. "I never realized how much they did for me until they couldn't anymore, or how little they did for you. I'm sorry, Megan. I'm sorry I was a part of it." It was the first genuine apology I had ever received from my family. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. The next morning I met with my parents. They tried their old tricks, the justifications, the subtle blame shifting, but it didn't work on me anymore. I laid out my new terms. Any future relationship would be based on respect, equality, and therapy. For them. It was a boundary they weren't ready for, but for the first time, the ball was in their court, not mine. On my windowsill, next to a thriving orchid, sits that pink piggy bank. It's no longer empty. Every Sunday for the past year, I've added a single dollar bill. $52. Each one represents a week that I chose myself. A week that I held my boundaries. A week that I honored my own worth. It's no longer a symbol of their dismissal. It's a monument to my own resilience. I learned the hardest, most valuable lesson of my life that year. Your value is inherent. It isn't determined by your family's ability to see it. It isn't something you have to earn through endless sacrifice. It just is. And sometimes, the only way to truly claim it is to have the courage to walk away from everything you've ever known and start again. This journey has been incredibly difficult, but it has also been my salvation. And it makes me wonder about your stories. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with the people you love? Tell me about your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice. Because sharing these stories, that's how we remind each other that we're not alone.